Picture this. A young man walks into the toughest military base in America, looking like he just stepped off a college campus. Clean-shaven, soft hands, designer sneakers peeking out from under his uniform pants. The hardened Marines around him take one look and start placing bets on how long he'll last before crying for his mother. They call him names behind his back. College boy. Pretty boy. Fresh meat. Some even question whether he accidentally wandered into the wrong building, thinking maybe he was looking for the Navy recruitment office down the street where things might be easier. But what these battle-tested Marines don't know is that this unassuming young recruit carries a secret so explosive, so unbelievable, it will shake the very foundations of their respect, their assumptions, and everything they thought they knew about what makes a true warrior. What they don't know is that in exactly 72 hours, a phone will ring in the commanding officer's quarters. On the other end will be a voice that makes grown men stand at attention even through a telephone line. A voice belonging to someone so legendary in military circles that his call sign alone can silence an entire room. What they don't know is that this fresh recruit they're laughing at has already earned a reputation in places so classified that most of these Marines don't even know they exist. Places where the impossible becomes routine and where only the deadliest of the deadly are allowed to operate. What they don't know is that they're about to witness something that will become military base legend, the day Iron Wolf stepped out of the shadows and into the light, changing everything these Marines thought they knew about strength, courage, and what it truly means to serve your country. The story you're about to hear isn't just about military training or proving oneself. It's about the moment when assumptions crumble, when respect is earned in ways no one saw coming, and when a legend reveals himself to be even more extraordinary than the whispered stories suggested. This is the true story of how one phone call from a 4-star SEAL Admiral turned a routine training exercise into an unforgettable demonstration of what real warriors are made of. This is the story that changed how an entire Marine unit looked at courage, skill, and the unexpected places where heroes can emerge. Get ready to discover why they call him Iron Wolf. The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon when Marcus Chen stepped off the military transport bus at Camp Pendleton. His brand new Marine utilities still had crisp creases, and his boots shined like mirrors. At 23 years old, he looked every bit the part of what the drill instructors called a Hollywood Marine, the kind who cared more about appearance than substance. Sergeant Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran with scars mapping stories across his weathered face, watched Marcus grab his duffel bag and couldn't help but shake his head. The kid looked like he'd gotten lost on his way to a college fraternity party. His hands were soft, unmarked by the calluses that came from real work. His posture, while technically correct, lacked the edge that came from months of brutal training. "Great," Rodriguez muttered to his buddy, Staff Sergeant Williams. "Another trust fund baby playing soldier." The other Marines noticed too. Word travels fast on a military base, especially when someone sticks out like a sore thumb. By lunch, half the base was buzzing about the new guy who looked like he'd never seen a day of real combat training in his life. They watched him navigate the mess hall, sitting alone while conversations died down around him. Marcus could feel their eyes on him, could hear the whispered comments. He'd been through this before, though these Marines didn't know that. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best strategy was to let people underestimate you. It made things simpler, cleaner, and often more effective when the time came to act. During afternoon training exercises, Marcus performed adequately but not exceptionally. He hit his targets on the shooting range with decent accuracy, nothing spectacular. He completed the obstacle course in respectable time but didn't break any records. He followed orders precisely but didn't volunteer for extra challenges. To everyone watching, he appeared to be exactly what they expected. Competent enough to get by, but nothing special. Private Johnson, a farm boy from Texas who'd earned his stripes through pure grit and determination, watched Marcus during hand-to-hand combat training. The instructor paired them together, probably thinking it would be good for the new guy to learn from someone with real fighting experience. "Easy there, college boy," Johnson said with a grin as they circled each other on the mat. "I'll try not to hurt you too bad." Marcus nodded politely and assumed a basic fighting stance. When Johnson lunged forward with a simple takedown attempt, Marcus allowed himself to be taken down, tapping out quickly to avoid any real struggle. The watching Marines chuckled and shook their heads. Another soft recruit who'd probably wash out within the month. What they didn't see was how Marcus controlled his fall, how he positioned his body to avoid any real impact, how he could have easily reversed the position if he'd wanted to. They didn't notice the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging exits, identifying potential weapons, assessing threat levels without even thinking about it. These were habits ingrained so deeply that he did them unconsciously, the result of training far more intensive than anything these Marines had experienced. That evening, Marcus sat in his bunk reading a paperback novel while the other Marines gathered around Johnson, who was regaling them with stories of his easy victory over the new guy. The laughter was good-natured but pointed. They'd already written him off as just another recruit who'd bought into the Marine mythology without having the substance to back it up. Corporal Davidson, a squad leader with 3 combat tours under his belt, approached Marcus's bunk. He was one of the few who hadn't joined in the joking, though he clearly shared the others' assessment. "Hey, Chen," Davidson said, sitting on the edge of the bunk across from Marcus. "Look, I know this is all new to you, and I know some of the guys are giving you a hard time. That's just how it is here. You earn respect through action, not through looking the part." Marcus looked up from his book, giving Davidson his full attention. "I understand, Corporal. I'm here to learn and serve however I can." Davidson nodded, though something in Marcus's calm, steady gaze made him pause. There was something about the way the young man held himself, a stillness that didn't quite match his apparent inexperience. But Davidson shook off the feeling. He'd seen plenty of recruits who thought they could fake confidence. "The thing is," Davidson continued, "we've got a big training exercise coming up next week. Multi-unit operation with some special forces observers. It's going to be intense, and everyone needs to pull their weight. I need to know you're going to be ready." "I'll be ready, Corporal," Marcus replied simply. Davidson studied him for another moment, then stood up. "I hope so, Chen. Because if you're not, it won't just be your reputation on the line. It'll be all of ours." After Davidson walked away, Marcus returned to his book, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about the call he'd received 3 days ago, the gruff voice that had given him his new assignment. The mission was supposed to be simple: blend in, observe, and report back on training protocols and unit readiness. What he hadn't expected was how difficult it would be to watch these good Marines dismiss him, without knowing the first thing about who he really was. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Marcus performed adequately in all exercises, never excelling enough to draw special attention, never failing badly enough to cause real concern. He became background noise, the unremarkable recruit who'd probably make an adequate Marine eventually, if he stuck with it. During a particularly challenging field exercise, the unit had to navigate through a complex terrain course while carrying full gear. The course was designed to test endurance, problem-solving, and teamwork. Marcus stayed in the middle of the pack, neither leading nor falling behind. When they encountered obstacles, he contributed to solutions without taking charge. When they had to cross a river, he helped others but didn't demonstrate any special water survival skills. What the other Marines didn't realize was that Marcus had navigated terrain far more challenging than this, often while being hunted by hostile forces. He'd crossed rivers in combat zones where the water itself might be contaminated or where snipers waited on the far bank. This training course, while rigorous by normal standards, felt almost leisurely to him. Sergeant Rodriguez watched Marcus help a struggling Marine carry extra gear during the final stretch of the exercise. It was a decent thing to do, showed good character, but Rodriguez had seen plenty of recruits try to win points through helpful gestures. What impressed him more was that Marcus didn't make a show of it, didn't look around to see if anyone noticed his good deed. Still, Rodriguez remained skeptical. In his experience, the Marines who looked too clean, who came from comfortable backgrounds, often cracked under real pressure. Combat wasn't about being nice to your fellow Marines during training. It was about being willing to run toward gunfire when every instinct screamed at you to run away. The week progressed with Marcus settling into a routine. He woke early, trained hard enough to avoid criticism, ate his meals quietly, and spent his evenings reading or writing in a journal that he kept locked in his footlocker. The other Marines gradually stopped paying attention to him, which was exactly what he wanted, but Marcus was paying attention to them. He studied their tactics, their communication patterns, their individual strengths and weaknesses. He noted how they worked together as a unit, where their training was solid and where there were gaps that could be exploited by an enemy force. He observed their equipment, their maintenance routines, their security protocols. More importantly, he got to know them as people. Johnson's bravado covered deep concern about his family's struggling farm back in Texas. Davidson pushed himself harder than anyone else because he felt responsible for every Marine under his command. Rodriguez's gruff exterior hid a man who genuinely cared about training the next generation of warriors. These weren't just Marines to Marcus anymore. They were good men doing a difficult job, and despite their assumptions about him, he found himself genuinely respecting their dedication and professionalism. It made what was coming next both easier and harder at the same time. The Thursday before the big training exercise, Marcus received a visit that would change everything. He was cleaning his rifle when Corporal Davidson approached with a serious expression. "Chen, you need to report to Colonel Morrison's office immediately," Davidson said. Marcus looked up, feigning surprise. "Did I do something wrong, Corporal?" "I don't know, but when the base commander wants to see a recruit personally, it's usually not for good reasons," Davidson replied. "Better get moving." As Marcus walked across the base toward headquarters, he could feel eyes on him. Word was already spreading that the new guy had been called to see the old man himself. The speculation ranged from him being in serious trouble to being kicked out of the program entirely. Marcus knocked on Colonel Morrison's office door and heard the gruff "Enter" from inside. He stepped into the office, came to attention, and saluted crisply. Colonel Morrison was a man who'd earned his position through decades of distinguished service. His desk held photos from multiple combat deployments, and his ribbon rack told the story of a career spent in harm's way. He looked up from a file folder with Marcus's name on it, studying the young Marine with sharp, intelligent eyes. "At ease, Marine," Morrison said. "Take a seat." Marcus sat down, maintaining proper posture while trying to look appropriately nervous. Morrison continued reading the file for several long moments, occasionally glancing up at Marcus with an expression that gave nothing away. Finally, Morrison closed the file and leaned back in his chair. "Son, I've been in the Marines for 32 years. In that time, I've learned to read people pretty well. And right now, I'm getting some very interesting information about you." Marcus remained silent, waiting for the colonel to continue. "See, I got a phone call this morning from someone very high up the chain of command. Someone who doesn't usually concern himself with individual Marines at the recruit level," Morrison said. "This person told me some very interesting things about your background, son. Things that don't match up with the act you've been putting on since you got here." Morrison opened another file folder, this one much thicker than the first. Marcus could see classified markings on several documents inside. "It seems you've been holding out on us, Marine. The question is, why?" Marcus met Morrison's gaze steadily. "Sir, I was following orders to maintain operational security and assess unit readiness through direct observation." Morrison nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. The thing is, son, tomorrow's training exercise just got a lot more interesting. We're going to have some very special observers, and I have a feeling they're going to want to see what you're really made of." The colonel stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the training grounds where Marines were preparing for the next day's exercises. "You know what I think, Chen?" Morrison said without turning around. "I think tomorrow, these Marines are going to learn that their assumptions about people can be very, very wrong. And I think you're going to show them what a real warrior looks like." Marcus remained at attention, but inside, he felt a mix of anticipation and concern. The mission parameters were about to change dramatically, and soon his carefully maintained cover would be blown. The question was whether these good Marines would be able to handle the truth about who he really was and what he was capable of. As Marcus left the colonel's office and walked back across the base, he could feel the weight of tomorrow's revelation pressing down on him. By this time next day, Iron Wolf would no longer be a secret, and everything would change forever. The training exercise began before dawn on Friday morning. Marcus woke at 0400 hours, same as every other Marine in his unit, but today felt different. There was electricity in the air, anticipation mixed with the usual pre-exercise tension. The Marines around him went through their morning routines with extra precision, knowing that today's performance would be closely watched and evaluated. Sergeant Rodriguez gathered the squad for a final briefing in the pre-dawn darkness. His voice carried the authority of a man who'd seen real combat, and every Marine hung on his words. "Listen up, Marines," Rodriguez began, his breath visible in the cool morning air. Today's exercise is going to test everything we've learned. We've got observers from multiple special operations units watching us, so I want everyone at their absolute best. No mistakes, no shortcuts, and no excuses. Marcus listened carefully while maintaining the same slightly nervous expression he'd worn for the past week. Around him, the other Marines checked their weapons and equipment one final time. Johnson cracked his knuckles and rolled his shoulders, psyching himself up for the challenges ahead. Davidson moved through the squad, offering quiet words of encouragement and last-minute reminders. The exercise scenario was complex. Their unit would be inserted into a simulated hostile environment where they would have to complete multiple objectives while being hunted by an opposing force. They would need to demonstrate small unit tactics, combat skills, medical training, and leadership under pressure. It was the kind of exercise that separated the competent Marines from the truly exceptional ones. As they boarded the transport vehicles that would take them to the starting point, Marcus noticed several unmarked SUVs following their convoy. The observers Rodriguez had mentioned were clearly taking this exercise seriously. Through the tinted windows of the lead SUV, Marcus caught a glimpse of a figure he recognized but couldn't acknowledge: Admiral Harrison, the SEAL commander who'd personally briefed him on this assignment. The insertion point was a rugged hillside 20 miles from the base, designed to simulate the kind of terrain they might encounter in real-world operations. As the Marines disembarked and formed up, Marcus could see hidden observation posts scattered throughout the area. This wasn't going to be a typical training exercise where instructors shouted corrections and stopped action to make teaching points. This was going to be as close to real combat as training could get. Rodriguez deployed his Marines according to standard small unit tactics, with Johnson taking point, Davidson leading the main element, and Marcus assigned to the rear guard position, exactly where you'd put the Marine you trusted least in a real combat situation. Marcus accepted the assignment without comment, though he noticed how the positioning would actually give him the best overall view of the unit's performance. The first objective was a reconnaissance mission. The Marines had to identify and report on a simulated enemy position without being detected. As they moved through the terrain, Marcus watched his fellow Marines demonstrate the skills they'd been drilled on countless times. Their movement was good, their noise discipline adequate, their spacing appropriate for the terrain. But Marcus also noticed things the others missed. The observation post they were approaching had fields of fire that weren't immediately obvious. There was a natural depression that would provide better concealment than the route Davidson was choosing. The wind direction was wrong for their current approach, meaning any scent or sound would carry directly toward the enemy position. For a moment, Marcus considered whether to speak up. His cover story would suggest that he might notice these things from his civilian education, maybe reading military history books or playing tactical video games. But drawing attention to his observations would risk exposing capabilities he wasn't supposed to have. Instead, he watched as the squad moved into position, executed their reconnaissance, and completed the objective successfully, if not perfectly. The enemy force, actually Marines from another unit playing the opposing role, never detected them, though they came closer than anyone realized. The second objective required the squad to assault and clear a fortified position. This was where Marcus knew the real test would begin. Combat, even simulated combat, had a way of revealing truth about people that no amount of peacetime training could hide. Davidson positioned his Marines for the assault, using fire and maneuver tactics that were textbook perfect. Johnson and 2 other Marines would provide covering fire, while the rest of the squad bounded forward to assault the position. Marcus was assigned to the base of fire element, where his supposedly limited combat skills would be less likely to endanger the mission. As the assault began, Marcus watched something beautiful and terrible unfold. These Marines, who had dismissed him as a soft college boy, transformed into a precision fighting machine. Johnson's covering fire was accurate and disciplined. Davidson led the assault element with courage and tactical intelligence. Even the newest Marines moved with confidence and purpose. But the opposing force was well prepared and aggressive. What was supposed to be a straightforward assault turned into a complex evolving firefight that tested every skill the Marines possessed. 2 members of the assault element were declared casualties by the exercise controllers, forcing Davidson to adapt his tactics on the fly. That's when everything changed. A hidden machine gun position opened fire on the assault element, catching them in the open with devastating effect. In a real combat situation, half the squad would have been killed or wounded. Davidson made a split-second decision to pull his remaining Marines back to covered positions, but they were pinned down with no good options for escape. Marcus watched from his position with the base of fire element as the situation deteriorated rapidly. The exercise controllers were letting the scenario play out naturally, and it was becoming clear that Davidson's squad was in serious trouble. In a real combat situation, this would be the moment when training either proved sufficient or catastrophically failed. From his concealed position, Marcus could see what the others couldn't. There was a flanking route through a small ravine that would allow a small element to get behind the machine gun position. It was dangerous, requiring someone to move alone through terrain that offered minimal cover, but it was possible. Johnson, lying prone behind a fallen log, was frantically trying to suppress the machine gun with his rifle. Davidson was on his radio, calling for support that wouldn't come in time to save his Marines. The other members of the squad were returning fire, but their position was rapidly becoming untenable. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Without waiting for orders or permission, he began moving. But this wasn't the careful, tentative movement of an inexperienced Marine. This was something else entirely. Marcus flowed through the terrain like water, using every piece of available cover, moving in patterns that seemed impossible to anyone watching. Rodriguez, observing from a hidden position 50 meters away, blinked hard and looked again. The college boy who couldn't handle a simple hand-to-hand combat exercise was moving like a ghost, covering ground that should have taken 10 minutes in less than 3, all while remaining completely invisible to the opposing force. Marcus reached the flanking position without being detected, despite moving through terrain that offered almost no concealment. From his new position, he could see the entire enemy defensive setup, including positions that Davidson's squad hadn't identified. More importantly, he could see the solution to the tactical problem that was about to result in mission failure. But solving the problem would require abandoning his cover completely. There would be no way to explain how a fresh recruit could accomplish what he was about to do. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard Davidson's increasingly desperate radio calls. The squad was taking simulated casualties at an alarming rate, and the exercise controllers were preparing to declare the mission a failure. In a real combat situation, these good Marines would be dying while he watched from concealment. Marcus keyed his radio with the call sign he'd been using for the past week, the unremarkable identifier of an unremarkable Marine. But what came out of his mouth next would echo across the base for years to come. Wolf 6. This is Iron Wolf. I have eyes on the entire enemy position and am in position to provide a solution. Request permission to engage. The radio went silent. Not just his unit's frequency, but every frequency being monitored by the exercise controllers. In the observation posts scattered around the training area, senior officers and special operations personnel sat up straighter, suddenly paying very close attention to what was happening. Davidson's voice came back over the radio, confused and strained. Iron Wolf? Who is Iron Wolf? Chen, is that you? From his concealed position in the ravine, Marcus smiled grimly. There was no going back now. Affirmative, Wolf 6. Iron Wolf is in position and ready to execute. What happened next would be talked about in Marine Corps training circles for decades. Marcus Iron Wolf began to systematically dismantle the enemy position with a combination of precision, tactics, and sheer audacity that left everyone watching speechless. He didn't just flank the machine gun position. He eliminated it so quickly and efficiently that the opposing force Marines didn't have time to react. He didn't just neutralize one threat, he identified and engaged multiple positions in a sequence that demonstrated an understanding of battlefield dynamics that went far beyond anything taught in basic training. But most importantly, he did it all while coordinating with Davidson's pinned-down squad, turning what had been a desperate defensive situation into a textbook assault that would later be used as a case study in small unit leadership schools. Rodriguez, watching from his observation post, grabbed his binoculars and focused on the figure moving through the terrain below. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare, tactics, and the capabilities of human beings in combat. The Marine he'd dismissed as a soft college boy was operating at a level that Rodriguez, with 20 years of experience including multiple combat deployments, had never seen before. This wasn't just good training or natural ability, this was something else entirely. As the simulated firefight reached its conclusion with the complete defeat of the opposing force, Marcus began moving back toward his squad's position. But now he moved differently. Not like someone trying to stay hidden, but like someone who owned the battlefield completely. Davidson's voice came over the radio again, but this time there was something different in his tone. Confusion, certainly, but also a growing realization that everything he'd assumed about his squad was wrong. Iron Wolf, this is Wolf 6. Return to base position for debrief. And Chen, Davidson paused, searching for words. We need to talk. As Marcus made his way back to the squad's rally point, he could see the other Marines watching him, with expressions that ranged from shock to disbelief to something approaching awe. Johnson, the farm boy who'd so easily taken him down in hand-to-hand training, was staring at him like he'd never seen him before. But the biggest shock was yet to come. As the squad gathered for their post-exercise debrief, Marcus could see vehicles approaching through the dust. Not the regular Marine vehicles they'd been expecting, but those unmarked SUVs that had followed their convoy that morning. The lead vehicle stopped 50 meters from their position, and Marcus watched as Admiral Harrison stepped out, followed by several other figures in military uniforms that bore the insignia of units most of these Marines had only heard whispered about in bars after too many drinks. Rodriguez, still struggling to process what he'd witnessed, approached Marcus with something approaching reverence. But before he could speak, Admiral Harrison's voice carried across the training area, crisp and clear in the desert air. Iron Wolf, front and center. Every Marine in the squad turned to look at Marcus, who was already moving toward the Admiral with the confident stride of someone reporting to a superior he knew well. As he walked away from his squad mates, Marcus could hear the whispered conversations beginning behind him. Did he just say Iron Wolf? Who the hell is Iron Wolf? That's Chen, but how does he know that Admiral? What the hell is going on here? As Marcus reached Admiral Harrison and came to attention, the Admiral's stern expression broke into the slightest hint of a smile. Outstanding work, Iron Wolf. I think it's time these Marines learned who they've been sharing their bunks with. Behind them, Rodriguez, Davidson, Johnson, and the rest of the squad watched in stunned silence as their assumptions about reality began to crumble completely. Admiral Harrison stood before the gathered Marines, his presence commanding absolute attention even in the middle of the desert training area. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but none of the Marines seemed to notice the heat. Their entire focus was on the man who had just called their supposedly inexperienced squad mate by a call sign that carried legendary weight in special operations circles. Marines, Admiral Harrison began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to addressing elite warriors. You have just witnessed something remarkable. Not just the tactical excellence displayed during this exercise, but something far more important. You've witnessed what happens when preconceived notions meet reality. Rodriguez stepped forward, his confusion evident despite his attempts to maintain military bearing. Sir, with respect, I think there's been some kind of mistake. Chen here is a new recruit, barely been with us a week. There's no way he could be... Admiral Harrison held up a hand, stopping Rodriguez mid-sentence. Sergeant, what you think you know about Marine Chen is exactly what he wanted you to think. The question is, are you ready to learn the truth? The Admiral gestured toward Marcus, who stood at attention nearby. Iron Wolf, would you care to enlighten your squad mates about your background? Marcus remained at attention but turned to face his fellow Marines. For a moment, he looked exactly like the uncertain recruit they'd known for the past week. Then something changed in his posture, his expression, his entire presence. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. This was no longer Marcus Chen, the college boy trying to prove himself. This was Iron Wolf, and the difference was like night and day. Marines, Marcus began, his voice carrying new authority. My name is Marcus Chen, but in certain circles, I'm known by the call sign Iron Wolf. I am a member of SEAL Team 6, currently assigned to Naval Special Warfare Development Group. I have been embedded with your unit for the past week as part of a training assessment and evaluation mission. The silence that followed was deafening. Johnson's mouth literally dropped open. Davidson blinked rapidly, as if trying to process information that didn't fit into any framework he understood. Rodriguez just stared, his 20 years of military experience providing no context for what he was hearing. Admiral Harrison stepped forward again. Iron Wolf has completed 43 classified missions across 6 combat zones. He holds the Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and a Presidential Unit Citation. He is fluent in 7 languages, holds advanced degrees in both military science and international relations, and is qualified in every form of warfare from underwater demolitions to high-altitude insertion. With each word, the Marines felt their understanding of the world shifting. The man they'd been dismissing as soft, inexperienced, untested, was being described as one of the most elite warriors in the American military. But Admiral Harrison wasn't finished. More importantly for your purposes today, Iron Wolf volunteered for this assignment specifically to evaluate the readiness and effectiveness of regular Marine units. His report will influence training protocols and resource allocation for Marine infantry units across the entire Corps. Davidson found his voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Sir, the hand-to-hand training." Johnson took him down easily. He seemed like he'd never been in a real fight. Marcus smiled slightly, the same polite expression he'd worn all week taking on entirely new meaning. "Private Johnson is an excellent Marine and a natural fighter. Under normal circumstances, that takedown would have been perfect. But I wasn't trying to win, Corporal. I was trying to observe how your training protocols work with new recruits, and how the unit integrates new members." Johnson stepped forward, his Texas drawl thick with disbelief. "You mean you let me win, just like that? Would you like a demonstration of what the outcome would have been if I'd been trying?" Marcus asked, his tone completely neutral. Admiral Harrison chuckled. "I wouldn't recommend it, Private. Iron Wolf once eliminated an entire terrorist cell using nothing but hand-to-hand combat techniques. The mission report is still classified, but I can tell you that 12 armed hostiles became 0 armed hostiles in less than 90 seconds. Rodriguez felt his worldview continuing to crumble. The shooting range, the obstacle courses, all the training exercises, you were holding back the entire time? Marcus nodded. My actual qualification scores would have raised questions I wasn't prepared to answer at the time. A SEAL Team 6 operator doesn't usually score in the merely competent range on Marine training exercises. To demonstrate his point, Marcus walked over to where a training rifle was lying on the equipment table. Without seeming to aim, he pointed the weapon toward a target 300 meters away and fired 3 quick shots. Through binoculars, the Marines could see 3 holes clustered so tightly in the center of the bullseye that they appeared to be a single hole. "That's more representative of my actual capabilities," Marcus said simply, setting the rifle back down. The implications were staggering. For an entire week, one of the most elite warriors in the American military had been living among them, observing their every move, evaluating their performance, all while successfully convincing them he was just another inexperienced recruit. Corporal Davidson, always the practical leader, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Sir, what does this mean for us? What happens now?" Admiral Harrison exchanged a look with Marcus before answering. "That depends largely on what Iron Wolf observed during his time with your unit and what recommendations he makes in his report." Marcus stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of genuine respect. "Marines, what I observed during my time with your unit exceeded my expectations in almost every category. Your training is solid, your leadership is exceptional, and your dedication to each other, and to the Corps, is absolute." He gestured toward Rodriguez. "Sergeant Rodriguez, your experience and judgment kept this squad functioning effectively, even when you were dealing with what you perceived as a weak link. That's the mark of a true leader." Turning to Davidson, he continued. "Corporal Davidson, your tactical decisions during today's exercise were sound, and your concern for the welfare of your Marines never wavered, even under extreme pressure." Looking at Johnson, Marcus smiled. "Private Johnson, your natural fighting ability and protective instincts toward your fellow Marines are exactly what the Corps needs. With the right advanced training, you could have a future in special operations if you're interested." The Marines stood in stunned silence, trying to process praise from someone whose opinion they were only now beginning to understand the value of. Admiral Harrison spoke again. "Iron Wolf's primary recommendation is that this unit be selected for advanced training opportunities and priority assignment to forward deployment rotations. In his assessment, you represent the best of what Marine infantry units can achieve." Rodriguez found his voice, though it was thick with emotion. Sir, we spent a week treating you like garbage. Making jokes, dismissing you, treating you like you didn't belong here. Marcus's expression softened. Sergeant, you treated me exactly the way Marines should treat someone they perceive as unproven. You maintained standards, you demanded excellence, and you protected the integrity of the unit. Those are the right instincts, and they're exactly what makes the Marine Corps the fighting force it is. He paused, looking at each of the Marines in turn. The fact that I was able to maintain my cover for an entire week isn't a criticism of your judgment. It's a testament to my training in deception and infiltration. You weren't supposed to figure out who I was. That was the entire point of the exercise. Johnson stepped forward, his expression serious. Iron Wolf, sir, can I ask you something? Marcus nodded. When we were pinned down during the exercise, when it looked like the mission was going to fail, you broke cover to save us. You didn't have to do that. You could have let the exercise play out, let us fail, and written it up as a training deficiency. Why did you risk exposing yourself? The question hung in the air, and Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. Private, I've served with a lot of different units in a lot of different situations. What I learned during my time with your squad is that good Marines are rare and valuable, regardless of their official designation or unit assignment. When I saw you in trouble, I didn't see test subjects in an evaluation exercise. I saw Marines who deserved the best support I could provide. Admiral Harrison stepped forward. That response, Marines, is exactly why Iron Wolf was selected for this assignment. Technical skills can be taught, but judgment and character cannot. What you witnessed today was both exceptional tactical ability and exceptional judgment working together. Davidson looked at Marcus with new understanding. Sir, all those times you asked questions about our procedures, our equipment, our training, you weren't trying to learn, you were evaluating. Marcus shook his head. Actually, Corporal, I was doing both. SEAL Team 6 operates very differently from regular Marine units. We have resources, training, and support that most Marines never see. But what I learned from watching your unit is that effectiveness isn't just about having the best equipment or the most advanced training. It's about having Marines who trust each other completely and will sacrifice everything for their brothers. He gestured toward the squad. You achieved mission success today not because of superior firepower or advanced tactics, but because when the situation became desperate, every Marine in this unit was willing to risk everything for the others. That's something that can't be taught in any school or training program. Rodriguez stepped forward and extended his hand toward Marcus. Iron Wolf, it's been an honor serving with you, even if we didn't know who you were. Marcus shook the sergeant's hand firmly. The honor was mine, Sergeant. You run a good squad, and the Corps is lucky to have Marines like you. One by one, each member of the squad stepped forward to shake hands with the man they'd known as Marcus Chen, but now understood as Iron Wolf. The transformation in their attitudes was complete, but it wasn't just about newfound respect for his abilities. It was recognition that someone of his caliber had chosen to serve alongside them, had evaluated them, and found them worthy. As the informal reception line concluded, Admiral Harrison addressed the group one final time. Marines, what happened here today is classified at the highest levels. Iron Wolf's identity and mission cannot be discussed outside this group. However, I want you to understand that your performance during this evaluation will have lasting positive effects on Marine training and resource allocation. He paused, looking at each Marine individually. More importantly, you've earned the respect of one of the most elite warriors in the American military. That's not something that happens often, and it's not something any of you should take lightly. As the Admiral and his party prepared to leave, Marcus lingered for a moment with his former squad mates. Marines, he said quietly, what you did today, how you performed under pressure, how you supported each other, that's what real warriors look like. Don't let anyone tell you different. Johnson grinned, some of his natural confidence returning. Iron Wolf, sir, if you ever need a good Marine to watch your back, you know where to find us. Marcus smiled back, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the young Marine they'd known for a week. I'll remember that, Private. And Johnson? Next time we're on the mat together, I promise not to hold back. The laughter that followed was genuine and warm, the kind of laughter that comes when barriers are broken down and truth replaces assumption. As Marcus walked toward the waiting vehicles, Rodriguez called out after him. Iron Wolf. When they write the stories about today, what should we tell them about the fresh recruit who turned out to be a legend? Marcus stopped and turned back, his expression serious but warm. Tell them the truth, Sergeant. Tell them that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks like they don't belong there. Tell them that assumptions can be deadly in combat, but they can also blind you to the extraordinary people serving right alongside you. He paused, looking at the squad one final time. And tell them that some of the finest Marines in the Corps are serving in regular infantry units, doing the hard work of protecting America without recognition or special resources. Tell them that Iron Wolf learned as much from you as you learned from him. As the vehicles disappeared into the desert dust, the Marines stood in silence for several minutes, trying to process what they'd experienced. Finally, Davidson spoke for all of them. Well, Marines, I don't think any of us will ever look at a new recruit the same way again. Rodriguez chuckled, shaking his head. That's probably a good thing, Corporal. That's probably a very good thing. The story of Iron Wolf's week as Marcus Chen, the seemingly soft college boy who turned out to be one of America's most elite warriors, became legend throughout the Marine Corps. But for the Marines who lived it, who served alongside him and earned his respect, it became something more than legend. It became a reminder that excellence can hide in unexpected places, that assumptions can blind us to truth, and that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from discovering we were wrong about everything we thought we knew. Years later, when these Marines faced real combat, they would remember the lesson Iron Wolf taught them. Never underestimate anyone. Always be ready to be surprised. And sometimes the person who seems least dangerous is actually the most deadly warrior in the room. The fresh recruit had indeed been scoffed at, just as the title promised. But when the 4-star SEAL Admiral summoned Iron Wolf to reveal himself, everything changed. The Marines learned that day that legends don't always announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes they come quietly, observe carefully, and only reveal their true nature when the moment demands it. Iron Wolf had been ready. The question was whether they would be ready the next time they encountered someone who seemed too good to be true, or not quite what they appeared to be. In the Marine Corps, that lesson could mean the difference between life and death, between mission success and catastrophic failure. Iron Wolf had given them that lesson as a gift, wrapped in the humbling experience of discovering that the warrior they'd been looking for had been sleeping in the bunk next to them all along.